Welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. It is now 9:06 p.m. Central European Time, and what I have to say. It's the days are getting brutally short, pitch black outside. The days of the long evenings gone. As we head into the dismal, depressing, awful, um, short days, sunless days, um, and that's I always have to introduce it that way because that's the way it is. But having said that, welcome everybody who has joined me. I really appreciate it. And it's obviously 3:07 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States, 12:07 on the West Coast. And the big news of the day, big news of the day is the not unexpected resignation of Kimberly Cheetle, who is the director of the Secret Service. I have to say, I mean, we can all have fun about DEI and everything like that, and her ridiculous appointment. I thought her performance before Congress is Putin's shirt says, "Winter is not that bad where I live." Where do you live? I don't know. It's something about winter. I mean, the thing about winter is that I can live with cold. I mean, I don't have a problem with cold. I do have a serious issue with with sunless days. That's the problem. But anyway, Kimberly Cheetle's performance yesterday was quite bizarre. I mean, she knew that that Congress would be uh, after her, and presumably, I mean, if she still wanted to hold on to her job, and she obviously did want to hold on to her job because she um, somebody Casey says, got your ears lowered, looking sharp. Well, see, I've had a haircut, and I've got this sharp light. That's after all the complaints. I mean, everyone was complaining about, oh, this awful light. Oh, it's so terrible. But no, so I got myself a table lamp. Not that everyone's happy with it, but at least it does seem a little brighter. But anyway, she arrived before Congress really without any preparation. I mean, she hadn't really done the minimum of at least come with something. Come with a document. With you've prepared a timeline. We've done a preliminary investigation within the Secret Service, and we have come up with a timeline of what we think at this stage may have happened, the communications we had with local police, and so on and so forth. She came with nothing, and I think it enraged Virgo rising. You're very blue today, on my monitor at least. Yeah, I agree with you. I am wearing a blue shirt, but I don't know whether the lighting is particularly blue. Um, this is Arroyo Leota says, bad or good lighting, you always look fabulous, George. This is what I like to hear. This is exactly the kind of commentary that I favor, as opposed to other kinds of commentary, which unfortunately also appears. However, we have free speech here, so welcome all sorts of criticisms and even negative opinions. So anyway, her performance was abysmal. She didn't answer any of the drive-by says, when you lean back, you look purple. You turn purple. Do I turn purple? Well, I don't see that I turned purple. But it may be different. Putin's shirt says she didn't even answer the question about what Reagan's Secret Service Reagan's Secret Service head did after that fiasco. She answered the question that he remained in his post. He resigned. Hint, hint. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Now, um, the fiascos that took place on Saturday, July the 13th. I mean, already, I mean, we're getting a list of them, and it's becoming quite absurd. Now, Judy Hotchkiss, thank you very much, Judy. Always very generous. Thank you so much. Judy says, I know that you have said you don't believe that the shooting was an inside job, but Marjorie Taylor Greene asked Cheadle yesterday, was there an order to stand down? Yeah. Was there a conspiracy to kill President Trump? And Congressman Clay Higgins, chairman of the Homeland Security Board subcommittee, said at today's hearing that he's heard from a lot of his constituents who worry that the Secret Service was involved in a deliberate setup. He said that they deserve to have their questions answered. Well, I mean, my view is that at this stage, we don't have any direct evidence of the conspiracy. However, I don't dismiss it. I mean, there's no question. I mean, it is very, very peculiar for the Secret Service to be so unprepared. I mean, we know from Senator Ron Johnson's timeline. He has provided a preliminary timeline. He said that there was a security meeting at 9 a.m. on that Saturday, and the Secret Service didn't even bother showing up. There were all the other questions about why did the Secret Service draw up such a short perimeter, and which enabled Crooks to be outside of the perimeter, so therefore you didn't have to worry about the Secret Service. But well, with his AR-15, Trump was well within his range, so he was outside the Secret Service perimeter, but still was able to take a comfortable shot at the president. So that there's a lot of questions like that. And again, why was he allowed to sort of hang around? There were obviously questions about him. He had been spotted earlier. He looked very suspicious. He looked out of place, and so on. And it was just one question after another. I mean, how was he able to get on a roof of a building inside which the local police were embedded in the building? Why didn't the local police check the roof of the building? I mean, that's the most important thing. You want to be able to secure the roof. So there's any number of questions. Now, the question then is, who, if there is a conspiracy, who would have hatched the conspiracy? And I guess there is a plausible case to be made that there was a conspiracy to take out Trump, because this is happening 48 hours before the convention, and now the speculation that Trump was planning to introduce Vance, his VP pick. He was planning to introduce him at the rally. I mean, after all, it's perfectly within accepted practice to introduce your VP pick before the actual convention. And I think that there could well have been an attempt to take out both Trump and Vance. Now, again, that would suggest somebody knew ahead of time who Trump's pick would be. That's going a little bit far. But let's imagine that this is happening. Okay, 48 hours before the convention, and if you take out Trump, then what happens? What happens to the GOP? I mean, they're going to obviously have an open convention, and whom would they pick? Now, you had the primary process. You had Nikki Haley, who was runner-up to Trump, but the party wouldn't accept Nikki Haley. So then the question is, would there be a plan to cobble together some sort of a coalition ticket at the GOP convention? So you'd want as your number one some kind of a Trumpian. Who would be the Trumpian? I would assume that if there's going to be a discussion at the convention as to who would be Trump's heir, whom would Trump want to see as his successor, then, in other words, to whom would the delegates turn, then Trump's son, Don Jr., would have a lot of say in that. And Don Jr. would probably go for Vance. And he said, well, Vance is Trump's heir apparent. And maybe Jr. already knew by then that his father was going to pick Vance. However, there would be a lot of fighting within the party. And even if the party agreed to have Vance in the number one slot, Vance may well have been forced to hire Nikki Haley as his running mate. So he wouldn't have just been able to say, okay, well, you've got the nomination, because Vance's qualifications would not have been particularly startling. He's a junior senator from Ohio. He's only been in the Senate for 18 months. He's 39 years old, so he's barely old enough even to qualify to be president. So if there's some sort of a deal made at the convention to have Vance as the nominee, Vance may well have been forced to hire somebody else as his number two as a ticket. Now, they may well have tried to press him to hire Nikki Haley as his number two, or Marco Rubio as number two. I think there was a good chance that one way or the other there would have been a neocon on the ticket. So once you think about that, once you realize that a ticket that at the convention, the outcome would have been a ticket in which there would be a neocon on it. It wouldn't have been two kind of populist, nationalist, conservatives, whatever. Then you can say, well, that looks to me like a possible conspiracy. There would be a motive. So whenever you have a conspiracy, then you at least have some, well, what's the purpose of the motive? What's the purpose of the conspiracy? What do you want to achieve? Why do you want this person out of the way? And I think then you say, well, if you're going to have Nikki Haley on the ticket, or Marco Rubio on the ticket, then you say, okay, well, mission accomplished, because once one of them is on the ticket, the number one on the ticket can easily be packed off and dispatched, or he could just be rendered powerless. So there may well have been a move like that, but there's also the other aspect to it, which is Biden would suddenly have not been in such a bad shape, because if he's now no longer facing Trump, and he's say facing Vance, suddenly Biden doesn't look too bad, because then Biden, yes, he's old. However, he has age and wisdom and experience on his side. Whereas Vance, he just looks very young. I mean, he actually looks really young. He's, as I say, he's been in the Senate only 18 months. He's hardly an expert on foreign affairs, so do you really trust him to run foreign policy with these two big wars going on? So again, then you say, yeah, suddenly I think Biden would have looked pretty good. If it's Biden versus Vance, he would look good, and then the polling would look very different. So in a way, if you kind of construct the timeline, you say there's an assassination attempt on Trump. If it succeeds, then there's a neocon who's on the ticket, and it revives Biden's moribund campaign, because suddenly Biden doesn't look so bad. He now represents experience, particularly experience in this moment of national crisis. And that if it had succeeded, Biden would have milked it for all it was worth. He would be having national memorials to Trump. You would give him he'd be lying in state. Every honor would be lavished on Trump, and there'd be the whole hypocritical thing of hailing Trump as a great American, a great national leader. And Biden would then look presidential, generous. Hey, look at all the honors that he's lavishing, on Trump. He's lying in state on Capitol Hill. God knows how many memorial services you would have with Biden and Harris singing hymns of praise to Trump. So the dynamics of the election would be very different if that assassination attempt had succeeded. And by the same token, once that assassination attempt had failed, Biden's fate was sealed. I mean, it's like, the clock. We could have that. The campaign, the dynamics of the campaign changes because Trump is now out of the way, and it's Biden versus somebody who's a complete neophyte. And once that doesn't happen, then Biden's fate is sealed. And it was quite brutal. I mean, once Trump's alive, Trump appears at the GOP convention. In a way, then the plot had failed, and then the Democrats make that decision of pulling the plug on Biden. And I would imagine, this is what we were talking about yesterday, I would imagine that they were quite ruthless in what they delivered to Biden, which was that if you don't go now, we are going to be extraordinarily nasty to you. I think that they had Biden's medical records. I think that had probably been leaked to the congressional leaders, the Democratic congressional leaders, so they knew all about Biden's treatment for Parkinson's, Biden's cognitive issues, the tests that he had failed, and drip, 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 they would be leaking these Biden's medical records to the media. It would be an absolute humiliation for Jill, the family, and everything. They wouldn't want to go through that. And I think that they probably struck a deal with Biden. It says, okay, you step aside now. The moment you do, we're going to hail you as a great American, as a national hero, a historic president. Your accomplishments, were only surpassed by Lincoln, Washington, and FDR. We will just say that. If you don't go, then things will get quite nasty for you. And I think that threat is still hanging over Biden, because Biden is supposed to speak tomorrow, Wednesday, his address to the nation. Now, we still don't know whether he wrote that letter. I mean, we have to assume he didn't write that letter. It didn't sound like Biden. But if in some ways, when he addresses the nation on Wednesday, he expresses anger and resentment and rage and frustration at what was done to him, that he had been betrayed by his allies, by the people that he had done so much for, had treated him so terribly. If he goes down that path, well, first of all, I don't think they're going to allow him to address the nation if that's in the draft of his speech. But if he does, if that's his plan, then I think he would be eased out of that job immediately. And that would make life very easy for the Democrats, because, to be honest, I mean, Biden staying in that job doesn't do anything for the Democrats, because for the Democrats, it would be very much to their advantage to have Kamala Harris as president. So she would have the incumbency. She would be a kind of a fresh face. And then they can show the world, hey, look, she's commander in chief. Look, she knows what she's doing. She's holding meetings with generals, and she seems to know what she's doing. And let's keep her on. So at this stage, Biden seems to me to be very vulnerable. I think he's only being allowed to be president as part of a deal. They think, well, we're going to be kind to you. We're going to let you serve out your term. Do your thing for another 5 or so months, and then you can enjoy your retirement. But that's on the understanding that you don't do anything to sabotage our campaign in November. Because I think Biden will be very tempted to sabotage the Democratic Party campaign, because I think he's very resentful over what's happened to him now. And he was very resentful about what they did to him in 2016. That was, Obama, who basically passed him over. Obama just said to him, which is kind of unheard of, to say to his VP, I'm supporting Hillary against you. So, and then Biden then said, hey, yeah, but Hillary lost and I would have won. We don't know that, but Biden certainly thinks that he would have won in 2016 where Hillary lost. So now he's going to say that, Kamala will lose in November. And that's something he wants to show. He wants to show, I'm right, the Democrats are wrong, and I'm a better candidate and a more likely winner against Trump than Kamala is. So I think he would be very tempted to sabotage the Democrats' campaign. And I think the Democrats know that he may be tempted to sabotage. So the moment he falls out of line, the moment he seems to be kind of sabotaging Kamala, gleefully, maybe leaking things to the media, very unflattering stories about Kamala to the media, the moment they think that, they're going to get him out. And I would imagine that the easiest way to get him out is he suddenly falls ill and dies. Just that's it. I mean, he looks very frail. He looks very decrepit. Who would think there's anything strange about his suddenly dying? I mean, if they announced today, well, his sickness, his COVID, has taken a turn for the worse. We don't know whether he's going to make it through to the end of the week. And then again, that provides plenty of opportunity for when he dies, he's going to be lying in state. Kamala, will do her eulogies and again, memorial service, and everyone has to, bow and tell the world what a fantastic president Biden has been. It'll work to the advantage of the Democrats. So that's why Biden is in a very tricky spot, because the Democrats really have it. Because the easiest and most advantageous thing for the Democrats to do now would be just to get rid of him. He's serving no useful purpose for the Democrats. So I mean, just to go back to Judy's question, I'm not convinced that there wasn't a conspiracy. I'd say that. I think that this whole thing, the official story that we've received over the Trump assassination attempt, it lacks any plausibility. It just simply is completely implausible. That the whole thing, this 20-year-old were apparently no great shakes as a shooter. He has no social media profile. Nobody really knows much about him, and yet, he did something like this, which is very difficult to do. That's not an easy thing to do, to come really within a few millimeters of a successful assassination. And then he's taken out, boom, like that. So therefore, the counter snipers knew exactly who he was, who was doing the shooting, and immediately took him out. Which is very strange. Why did they allow him to take those shots when they could see him and could have taken him out before he had taken the shots? So that's why the story doesn't make a lot of sense. And a conspiracy does make sense. As I say, a conspiracy makes sense. You throw the Republicans in turmoil. Chances are that if there's a ticket that's forged at the GOP convention, there will be a neocon on that ticket, which will nullify any kind of Trumpism and so on. And it'll be a weak, vulnerable ticket. Biden, I think, would be in much better shape in the polls. And then once the assassination fails, lo and behold, what happens? The Democrats decide that's it. We're done with Biden. He's gone. Yes, there may well have been a conspiracy, but with every conspiracy, you kind of want to be able to put together the pieces. Like, how was this done? Who came up with this, and all the mechanics? We can see the rationality for it. That always makes sense, but we want to actually be able to say, who did what, when, and how, and figure out the mechanics of this. Anyway, let's take a look at on the locals board. A good locals contributors, and Danaki. Always good to see you, Danaki. Danaki always starts off with Hungarian with me. Jó estét, kedves George. So good evening, dear George. Do you think Trump is a shoo-in, or are the Dems not to be underestimated, even with dumb as bricks President Kamala Harris? I would say absolutely not. I mean, absolutely, Trump is not a shoo-in. Whether it's Biden, whether it's Harris, I never thought that Trump was a shoo-in. And there you have to look at the polls. I mean, the polls, really haven't moved. I mean, they absolutely, been exactly the same for the past year. Trump has a slight lead. Now, nationally and in the battleground states, he has a bigger lead, but not overwhelming. It's not something that wasn't surmountable. But we also know that the Democrats are absolutely ruthless in how they fight these campaigns. I think they're going to get. I think a lot of illegals are going to be voting. I think a lot of a lot of mass naturalization will take place between now and November, and then of course we know all about the problems with drop boxes and mail-in voting, where you have these very loose rules about when you can send in your vote. So, given the scale of the cheating that is likely to take place, absolutely not a shoo-in. And the whole thing about too big to rig, yeah, that's ideal. Ideally, it will be too big to rig. But I don't know whether that's, how plausible that is, because, people bought into the idea that Biden won 81 million votes in 2020. I mean, it made no sense. How could this person who didn't do anything in the campaign, couldn't fill a parking lot, and already looked decrepit, senile, made all sorts of ridiculous statements, like, if you're not voting for Biden, you ain't black, and really, really ridiculous stuff. Now, this man got 81 million votes. So we were asked to believe that. He got 81 million votes. That's 16 million more votes than historic Barack Obama won in 2008. It was ridiculous. It was laughable. And but that became the official dogma, and you had to absolutely repeat it, accept it. And if you didn't, then you were a conspiracy theorist and election denier and all the other terrible things that were done. And then again, as we've seen over the past few weeks, the Democrats never believed it for one moment. Absolutely never believed it for one moment that he won 81 million votes, because if they thought that this man won 16 million more votes than Barack Obama, then they would have kept him on. Why were they panicking about Biden's performance if they really believed that he had won 81 million votes? Of course, they didn't believe it for 1 minute. That's why they thought he was so vulnerable. And so, and why, when Biden continued to say, yeah, but I beat Trump. I beat him. I can beat him again. And they said, nah, they didn't believe it for one moment. So they didn't even buy into the whole story that that he beat Trump in 2020. So but that was the official story that you had to actually accept and repeat. Like that was official dogma. That Biden got 81 million votes. An amazing performance. So the question is, what happens now? Well, what is the media already doing? What you would expect them to do? They are taking a second look at Kamala Harris, and they're telling us what an amazing politician she is. How incredibly smart she is, how incredibly sharp she is in meetings, what a deft political operator she's always been. And as a prosecutor, she was absolutely devastating. She ripped apart the defendants and so on. So that they're gonna be selling us that. Now, there's a debate. There's just one debate scheduled. That might change. There might be more debates. So that was just the two debates that was scheduled for between Trump and Biden. But now that Biden's gone, we'll see whether there's just going to be only one debate. They might schedule more debates between Trump and Harris, and that might not work to Trump's advantage. That they obviously, that the moderators are going to make life as difficult as possible for Trump and as comfortable as possible for Harris. I got to read this because it's from Cynthia. I believe the light from your new lamp is causing your dark blue shirt to cast a slightly purple shade on your skin. Huh. Actually, it makes quite an interesting photograph of yourself. Well, that's good. I kind of like it, in fact, but I'm not sure if you're wearing a different colored shirts can cast a different shades of light on your skin, but it would be worth a try. All right. Okay. That's a good suggestion. Cynthia is really our kind of our aesthetic correspondent. I mean, she's always providing fascinating commentary on movies, and she's a real aesthete. So perhaps you could start by wearing a dark red shirt next time and see if it creates a pinkish hue to your skin. Okay, that's all right, good. But yes, thank you, Cynthia. So anyway, let's go back to the points made on locals, and then Danucki goes on. Also, his VP choice does not bode well in light of a militarized big tech influence and Zyocons in Iran and China hawks. I'm afraid it'll be drain the swamp to find the cabinet at the bottom. Pas deux. Larry Fink, Jamie Dimon already floated for big cabinet positions. I mean, that could well be the case. Vance is, I mean, he's essentially, he came up with he has the bio, the storyline, and then he kind of embraced this kind of national, I don't know, national conservatism, national revival, and whatever. But it's not clear to me that he's thought very deeply about issues of foreign policy, or indeed he's thought deeply about any of these issues or much. I mean, it's very much he has that story. He has this background. He feels betrayed by elites, but he's written well about it, and then there was a movie made about it. But you don't really get a sense that he's thought that much about it. About the sort of the bigger issues. I mean, as we covered the other day, this article that he wrote in the Financial Times about Ukraine, and ultimately it's the same kind of banalities that Republicans have peddled for years, which was that these European freeloaders, we bankroll NATO. These Europeans, they could contribute so much more. Trump has done so much for Ukraine, and therefore the Europeans need to step up. Otherwise, maybe we should just call it a day. So, when you look at that, you could certainly say, well, that could mean that Trump and Vance want to pull the plug on Ukraine and say, this isn't worth the candle. Or it could mean, hey, I suspect, which is, hey, the Europeans need to step up. They need to contribute more. And while we Americans focus on the big things, which is China, and of course Iran. And Iran is a interesting case because, again, as you say, Vance is an Iran hawk, And so therefore that's something that could come up uh, in the near future, a confrontation with Iran. Um, but the thing is that when Trump says, "Well, yeah, I'm getting this praise from Jens Stoltenberg," Stoltenberg said, I was a great president because I got everyone to pay up more towards NATO. So when you go around saying, well, I'm getting all this praise from Stoltenberg, and NATO is a lot stronger as a result of what I did than it would have been otherwise, then are you really anti-NATO? No, you're basically saying NATO should be doing more of what it's doing. So that's why, it's always, and it's deliberately, the media are playing it up as if somehow, oh, Trump is anti-NATO, Trump wants to pull out of NATO, Trump hates NATO, and so on. That's not really what Trump is saying. I mean, Trump was just saying, hey, why are we subsidizing all these wealthy countries that could contribute a lot more? And that's really, so when he says things like, hey, are you, oh, well, I'm going to tell NATO member states, are you paid up? And if they're not paid up, I'm not going to defend you. And I'm going to tell Russia to invade you if you're not paid up. Now, that's just obviously the way Trump expresses himself. But in another way, it's also the way Trump sees NATO. He thinks, that the Europeans are taking advantage of the Americans. They have a very nice, prosperous lifestyle. They use trade in order to undercut American industry, and Americans, we're basically underwriting their defense. Now he doesn't draw the conclusion, well, therefore this is a really ridiculous military alliance from which we need to withdraw. He's saying, no, I mean they got to pay up more, they got to cough up more money. And Vance it kind of thinks the same thing. So I'd like to think that Trump Vance will somehow pull the plug on NATO, at least pull the plug on the war in Ukraine, but I'm not at all sure they will, and there's nothing to indicate that's their intention. I mean, if you go by the writings in this America First Policy Institute, and again, they're not writing on behalf of Trump. I mean, they may claim to be speaking on behalf of Trump, but there's nothing there in any of those writings that indicate that Trump's agenda is to essentially to pull the plug on Ukraine. So, I mean, ultimately, that if you really want to end the war, then that's the only way to end the war. If you start playing these games, which is what this American that Fred Fleitz and Keith Kellogg, who wrote this article for American First Policy Institute, in which they're suggesting, well, we've got to make sure, we've got to send a lot more weaponry into Ukraine, but we have to tell Zelensky that he has to attend a peace conference, or else we're going to cut off aid. And then we tell the Russians, you have to attend this peace conference, or we will triple our aid to Ukraine. Well, that's very cute. But that's not going to get you anywhere, because if that's all Ukraine needs to do to keep this spigot flowing, then Zelensky will say, yeah, sure, we'll have a peace conference. Yeah, well, I don't mind. Let's have a peace conference. And in fact, Zelensky is saying that. He is now saying, yeah, we should have a peace conference. I think he suspects Trump might well be president in January, and Trump will push him into attending a peace conference. So he said, yeah, I'm ready for a peace conference, because if he says, no, I don't want to go to a peace conference to which Russia attends, then there might be a chance that Trump will say, well, that's it, we're cutting you off. So that if that's all he needs to do, to say, yeah, I'll attend a peace conference, that's fine. But that doesn't bring the war to an end. So anyway, Danaki says you should have Whitney Webb on to talk about these things. Yeah, I think that that's not a bad idea. I heard Robert Barnes going on and on about Whitney Webb in a very critical way the other day, and that you know, that made me think that we should probably have Whitney Webb on. So yeah. Anyway, Judy Hotchkiss says, I'm interested to see what George says about JD. I think he was a well-defined personality before he ever took money from Peter Thiel. And it looks like his attachment to Israel comes more from his fundy tendencies than from the usual DC corruption. I think that may well be. I mean, I think, I take your point. I mean, he wrote that book, and then, but he was promoted very quickly by Thiel. I, all the indications are that, however, that whatever the motivations on Israel, he knows which side his bread is buttered. I mean, you could just as easily say this about Trump. What does Trump really care about Israel? I mean, why? Never did in the past, other than, well, this is what you're supposed to do. This is where the donors are. This is where the powerful people with money are. And why wouldn't you? I mean, if you're a politician with ambitions, why would you in any way go against Israel in favor of whom? In favor of the Palestinians? I mean, who cares? I mean, I'm not saying that's my position, but I'm saying that if you're a politician in the United States, particularly in Republican politics, you say, well, Israel is what you support, and so in this case of Vance, he just does the obviously the acceptable thing, which is, well, I'm with Israel. But what that tells me is that there's no reason to expect anything different from Vance. I mean, there he is. He goes to visits Israel, does the usual thing, goes to the Wailing Wall, leans his head against the Wailing Wall. So whatever his motivation, he knows which side his bread is buttered. And so, even if we have a vice president, maybe he'll be president, maybe president quite soon. We will expect exactly the same policy from Vance on Israel as anybody else. I mean, there was a brief moment in 2015, 2016 when it looked as if Trump would break the mold, and he said, well, I don't need money from the Israel lobby, and therefore I'm going to take a fresh look at the Middle East. But I haven't seen any indication from Trump along those lines, and I haven't seen any indication from Vance. I mean, when has Vance ever said, something? I think our approach to the Middle East is very one-sided. And America has its own interests, and its interests are not to be encapsulated by unconditional support for Israel. I mean, when Nixon gave that interview, obviously it was actually late in life with what was it? Ted Koppel. Nixon, got away from the whole, the wonderful, glorious democracy of Israel, a natural ally, our best friend in the world, and and our interests and Israel's interests are inseparable. America and Israel are inseparable, and so on. And he said, no, they're very much separable, and they were very separable when I was president, because I told Israel that we will be pursuing good relations with Israel's neighbors. That sounds, of course, very anodyne, but to the Israelis, this was not at all good news, because essentially he was saying that America has all sorts of interest in the Middle East that go far beyond support for Israel. Now, I've not heard anything like that from Vance. In fact, on the Middle East, nothing. I mean, it's just, banalities. So, look, I mean, what Vance has said about Ukraine, I like, no question. I like all of that. What he said in his book, the Hillbilly Elegy, it's a very nice book. Not my sort of thing, but people like it. When he talks about America has to address its own domestic issues, I like all of that. When he said America is more than an idea, America is a real thing. It's a real concrete thing of people, land, culture, tradition, and so on. It's not just simply some banalities about the American idea in the way Obama and Biden defined it. I like all of that. But whether that amounts to a real rethink, well, we'll have to see. I mean, I'm ready to give him the benefit of the doubt. I don't want I don't want to start attacking him. He hasn't done anything to be attacked for. I'm just want to wait a little bit before hailing him as a great new leader. Anyway, Judy says, as for Larry Fink, please give me your source. So this is, I suppose, some of the. Please give me your source outside of Reddit or Bitcoin chatter. There is one and only relevant quote about Trump from Fink. Oh, this is apropos whether Larry Fink will be Treasury Secretary. Yeah, this is in response to what Danaki says. Fink, and that is from a 2017 meeting of Trump with CEOs, where he said, I see we have Larry here. Where is Larry Fink? Larry did a great job for me. He managed to get me a lot of money, and I have to tell you, he got me great returns last year. And then Judy goes on, agreed that Diamond would be a bad choice, although not as bad as Fink. But here again, the only quote is from an interview in June where Trump pushed to answer the question from Bloomberg, and he responded casually, he's somebody I would consider sure. I agree with you, Judy. I mean, I think we don't know, a lot of things about which way Trump is going to go. He's given indications that Diamond would be a serious choice. And then again, I mean, we've talked a lot about this. I've talked a great deal about all the things he said about Russia and about Ukraine, and trying to decipher all of that is very difficult, because he says different things to different people. He says whatever his interlocutor wants to hear. I mean, he had Boris Johnson. He met Boris Johnson in Milwaukee last week. On the basis of that meeting, Johnson wrote his column in the Daily Mail, putting forward a Johnson peace plan that he thought Trump would accept. Now, obviously, I'm not taking seriously anything Johnson says. He has no business speaking on behalf of Trump, but I'm sure he had to have at least floated these ideas to Trump for him then to go into the Daily Mail and says, "Oh, this might be acceptable to Trump." And the idea was basically, and this is kind of interesting because Johnson suggested, and again, he suggested, therefore Trump would have agreed. Johnson suggested that Russia returns to the status quo ante of February the 23rd, 2022. In other words, not to the 1991 borders, but at least Russia withdraws from the territories it's taken since February the 24th, 2022, which would be, but that's, it's surprising Johnson would suggest that. And then he said that there should be protections for Russian speakers, which is itself interesting for Johnson to mention that, because up until then, Ukraine has been hailed as a model democracy. So it's a model democracy. Why are we suddenly talking about protections for Russian speakers? And then, of course, the rest is, well, we'll bring you what's the of Ukraine, what isn't occupied by Russia. We're going to bring Ukraine into NATO and the EU. And then he also put forward, I guess, obviously some variant of lifting sanctions against Russia, and even going back to the old days of Russia returning to the G8. Now, all that is pie in the sky, and again, Johnson has no business talking for Trump. However, Johnson did fly into Milwaukee to talk to Trump, and he posed with those stupid photographs with the thumbs up. And I'm sure he floated this idea before Trump. Trump just didn't dismiss it. And then, of course, we had Viktor Orban. I mean, Orban's view is just simply you cut Ukraine off. And again, Orban seems to suggest that Trump is in agreement with that position. And so that just tells us we simply don't know which way Trump will go. And that is a problem. And it's a very serious problem, because if you're coming in as president, you really need to know what you're going to do. What's your plan? If all you're trying to do is to get past the election, we'll win the election, and then we're going to deal with all these problems on the day after, then you're setting yourself up for failure. I mean, no president succeeds like that. You go in on day one with a clear idea of what you want to accomplish. And the same goes with his treasury. I mean, if you're bringing in Jamie Dimon as your treasury secretary, then what exactly are you doing? You're going back to the whole, the tax cuts thing and so on. So the great presidents, the presidents who achieve things in office, usually have a list of top three things that I intend to do. This is how I go about this, in a way that Nixon did when he became president in 1969. I think he had a pretty good idea about the opening to China. I think he intended to improve relations with the Soviet Union, make détente kind of the centerpiece of his administration. And by doing all that, he would somehow downgrade the issue of Vietnam. So Vietnam just becomes small potatoes. It's like a nuisance that America needs to somehow address. Again, that's kind of what he accomplished. And I think he always intended to do that. He wrote an article in Foreign Affairs in 1967, kind of outlining what he intended to do. And my problem is that Trump hasn't done any of that. So we have a lot of speculation. These people writing these articles in America First Policy Institute, and then we have Boris Johnson. You got Viktor Orban, but we haven't really heard anything from Trump himself to give us some idea of what he intends to do. Anyway, Stone River says 2 people gave voice to the great unwashed in 2016, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. I still struggle to understand why J.D. criticized Trump so trenchantly at the time. Stone River. Okay, well, thank you very much, Stone, for the question and for your generous tip. I really appreciate it. You're right. You are absolutely right. I didn't really understand it either at the time. I mean, I don't want to say anything unkind, but he may, maybe he figured in 2016, A, Trump will lose, and B, if he wants to think about a career, whether in politics or as a commentator or as a media figure, pundit, whatever, he needed to distance himself from Trump. Trump was toxic. And I think that's why he went from interview to interview, being extremely nasty. He didn't just go and criticize Trump. I mean, he called Trump as an American Hitler and so on. I have to think that he probably thought that's the way to make a career. That's how you advance yourself. If you associate yourself with Trump, you're burning your bridges. You're going to become a reviled figure. You won't get invited onto Charlie Rose anymore. You won't get invited to all of the sort of the fashionable talk shows the way he was when he was promoting his book. He was getting on all these TV shows, and you wouldn't do it without attacking Trump. So that's my understanding of what he did. He then, of course, changed his view of Trump, people do things like that. I mean, as I say, it's not very flattering about him. But on the other hand, he was still young then, and ambitious, and then he decided that hey. If I want to go into politics, I'm going to need the support of Trump, and he obviously had great skills in winning over Trump, because Trump knew all about the comments that he had made throughout the 2016 campaign. So when he sought out Trump's support, particularly when he was running for the Senate in Ohio, he needed to address that problem. All the things that he had said about Trump in 2016, and evidently he managed to win Trump over. Trump was very suspicious, and you have to say, that took some doing. You have to admire him for having pulled that off. Because obviously, a lot of suspicion. But on the other hand, Trump is like that. He tends to be quite forgiving, as long as you're on the right side now. And he brought Elliot Abrams, the awful, horrible, evil Elliot Abrams. He brought him in to the administration. And then, even though there was a clear record of all the things that Elliot Abrams had said about him in 2016, but once Elliot Abrams did the appropriate mea culpa, all was forgiven, and he got a prize job. We'll have to see. I still think that Vance is largely an unknown. he's very young. It's a he's moved with great speed. With great ambition. He's had a lot of powerful people promoting him, supporting him. But would have to it's not unusual. There are plenty of other political figures who have also been promoted, and we're a bit of a blank slate. He's less of a blank slate than, say, Obama. I mean, if you remember the whole Obama craze in 2007, 2008, he really was a blank slate, and people just made up stuff about him. So Vance isn't. On the other hand, again, he's not the political messiah. So I think let's hold off before celebrating him. Cynthia, George, the name of the bank CEO, the Goldman Sachs CEO you were trying to recall the other day is Lloyd doing God's work Blankfein. Yes, that's right. Lloyd Blankfein. He was the chairman and CEO of Goldman Sachs. He kind of looked the part, a very evil-looking man. Here's one of the many outstanding limericks which were written about him and other banksters at the time. So let me read this limerick. The banksters have settled their fraud. Elites of the nation applaud. Justice impaired, citizens scared. 1% of nation over God. Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, that was and of course they were all saved by Obama. They brought, that was the function of Obama, a kind of pseudo radical, a pseudo anti-establishment figure, brought forth, because the public was enraged, and now he would really go after the people who have wrought so much misery on the country. And lo and behold, Obama didn't do any of that. And it was fairly obvious he would never do that, but nonetheless, a lot of people were enraged by what happened in 2008 and the rescue of the banks, not the rescue of the mortgagees. And then, Obama pulled this off while pretending to be some sort of a radical, a tribune of the people. So yeah, that's a Lloyd Blankfein. But it's funny, Lloyd Blankfein. There was the two of them. There was Blankfein and Jamie Dimon. Blankfein has kind of disappeared, but Dimon is still with us. And then this picture of Obama. Who's it? Obama, is he holding? Let me look at this picture. Yeah, Obama holding Kamala Harris. Dope. yeah. And then that's it. Yeah, so okay. And then DJ says, thank you very much, DJ. Says Kamala Harris is in nearby Milwaukee today. Yep. Perhaps I should leave the door open in order to hear the cheers. I can't wait for her to pick Hillary as her running mate. Then they can both wear "I'm with stupid" T-shirts with arrows pointing at each other. Well, I did at one point think that she might name Hillary as her running mate. But I have to think that she will do the reasonable thing, which is to, or at least a reasonable, rational political thing, which is to hire as your VP someone who can deliver an important state. So obviously she needs to win one of those big industrial Midwestern states. So she will hire Josh Shapiro, Gretchen Whitmer, or she'll go for somebody like the governor of Kentucky, who's a he's a Democrat governor in a red state. So that's what I think. The problem with picking Hillary as your VP, First of all, Hillary is now even less likable than she was in 2016, let alone 2008, because at least they kind of turned they created a kind of a new Hillary. She was nicely turned out, not the sort of figure from back in the Clinton presidency. But even so, she was just so intensely disliked that there was no way she could win that election. Now she's kind of filled with bitterness, so she's going to look even worse. I guess they could still repackage her, manufacture her, make her look better. The drawback is that for Kamala is if you've got your Hillary as your VP, you need a food taster around you, because once Hillary is within kind of sniffing distance of the throne, she's going to want the throne. She's not going to settle for the number 2 slot. She's not young. She wants that. The throne herself. So if I were Kamala, I would be very, very wary of having Hillary as my number 2, because then you are in serious trouble. It's very funny that that Gerald Ford hired Nelson Rockefeller as his VP. Obviously, this wasn't something that Ford wanted. This was imposed on him, because there's nothing in common between Gerald Ford and Nelson Rockefeller. Ford was a kind of small town, Midwestern, Main Street type of Republican, boring. He had been House Minority Leader, but only because the Republicans had been wiped out almost completely in the 1964 Goldwater debacle. So there weren't many other candidates who could be House Minority Leader than Gerald Ford. But then Ford did this strange thing. He hired Nelson Rockefeller as VP after he was thrust into the position of president following Nixon's resignation. And then you think, wow, that's a really dangerous thing to do, because now the Rockefellers are within sniffing distance of the throne. This is what they've always craved: the big enchilada, the presidency. The Rockefellers would take the presidency. And you'd have thought Gerald Ford would be aware of that. But he probably was aware of that. But he probably just didn't have any choice in the matter. He had to hire Nelson Rockefeller as his VP. And lo and behold, there were assassination attempts. There were 2 assassination attempts on Gerald Ford. And that would suggest you don't want to have as your VP somebody who was, the deep state, or the powerful figures want as president. So Nixon was eased out. They put in a kind of a cipher, a placeholder. No one really took Ford seriously. But whom did they take seriously? His number 2, Nelson Rockefeller. And then suddenly Ford is the subject of assassination attempt, 2 assassination attempts. And no one thought it odd. Nothing to see here, folks. Nelson Rockefeller was within inches of the presidency. Anyway, R. Brown says, no, this is you had a bit of the Marty Feldman Igor look from Young Frankenstein going on until your new do. Thank you. To be candid, I like the borderline crazed look, challenging false narratives and all. You need a bit of the crazed look to make that work. It's very, very odd what's a good look, because you sometimes, if you're going to present, wild hypothesis, you want to be as sober looking as possible. I mean, it's very hard for me to be sober looking, but I've always found that, well, if you put on a suit and tie, comb your hair, um, then you can say all sorts of outrageous things, and people will take you more seriously than if you come on um, as as as, uh, as Marty Feldman in Young Frankenstein. That film was quite funny. There was a funny line about something like was it something like is he's Frankenstein. I thought you were Frankenstein. Then well, you thought wrong. Something I can't remember. It was a long time ago. I thought you were Frankenstein. Well, you thought wrong. Anyway, 60 cents. Always good to hear from you. Greetings, George and fellow gagglers. I am guesstimating it will be about 12:30 p.m. in Silicon Valley by the time you reach my message. Well, it's probably it's actually about 1:22. It takes a long time to get to your message. Nikki Haley said in her speech to the RNC that Trump had asked her to speak. However, Trump was observed saying that, in fact, she had asked to speak at the convention. That's exactly right. She said that. Absolute brazen lie. She said that, well, I'm speaking here because Trump had asked me to speak, and I agreed, he invited me to speak, and I accepted his invitation. And then, as you say, Trump was there. I never invited her to speak. But it just shows you the deceitfulness of Nikki Haley, that she says that. Absolute lie. But once you say it, people hear it. I mean, how many people now know that, in fact, Trump had never invited her to speak, that she had approached Trump, and she'd wanted to speak. But Haley is, of course, a very treacherous person, because remember, after January the 6th, 2021, she went to the media and started giving off all these interviews saying, well, we should have been much more wary about Trump from the beginning. We've been, very patient with him. He has let us down time and again. And, it was, what happened on January 6th is entirely in keeping with everything else that Trump had done. She thought Trump was done. Trump was kind of, he's toast. And the moment she thought he was toast, she kind of stuck the knife in. But then, of course, she made a huge mistake. Trump is very resilient, and he wasn't done. And then she, of course, immediately put out feelers wanting to see Trump in Mar-a-Lago. No, I want to come down and talk to you in Mar-a-Lago. And eventually Trump relented. And then, of course, having relented, then, of course, Nikki Haley declared that she was going to run, having first said that she wasn't going to run against Trump. She then, of course, said, yeah, she would run against Trump. So she's a very, very treacherous, ambitious person, ruthlessly ambitious. And as I say, I think that if the assassination had succeeded on July the 13th, and the GOP convention would have been absolutely in turmoil about who would be the nominee, I wouldn't be surprised if Nikki Haley ended up on that ticket. She wouldn't be number one, but there would be some kind of a deal done within the party. If you have Vance as number one, then Haley as number two. So it touch and go that we don't have Haley there as as the running mate. So R. Brown says, actually, you had the Gene Wilder look. Yeah, well, I mean, neither is particularly flattering, but thank you. I know what you mean. Anyway, Cynthia says, near the end of the movie last night. So the last night we watched Tin Men, kind of a very entertaining movie. It was made in 1987. directed by Barry Levinson. It's set in early 1960s Baltimore, about the rivalry between two aluminum sidings salesmen. Um, it's to illustrate the horror and ghastliness of being a salesman, which we featured that last week when we did Glengarry Glen Ross, a very dark movie. Tin Men is also quite dark, but a lot more humorous and and I think much lighter in tone. Anyway, Cynthia says near the end of the movie, you can see a light bulb going off in BB's head when a black beetle slowly crosses the street in front of him and Tilly as they're driving down the street, making future business plans together. The entire scene is actually very upbeat, i.e. the black beetle plays a large part in as well. So you shouldn't see Tilly losing everything in the end as a sad ending after all. And then here's the black beetle that captures BB's attention. I kind of agree that last moment is a kind of redeeming ending for Tilly, because you have to assume that what's going to happen is that the two of them are going to go into business together. Presumably, they're going to be selling these Volkswagen Beetles. But yeah, but up until then, I mean, Tilly had lost everything. I mean, he lost his wife, he lost his home. The IRS is after him. He doesn't have a car anymore. He's been kicked out of his job. I mean, it's like you've lost everything. You don't have anything any longer. But that very ending, I agree, Cynthia, when they're together, and then you think, well, that's really what's going to happen. That the two of them are going to go into business together. I mean, he's still lost his wife, but at least he's going to have a friend, somebody who's going to look after him. So he'll have some means of livelihood. But up until then, I think it was very, very, very grim for him. Anyway, Cynthia goes on. Thank you very much, as usual, Cynthia. Very generous of you. Cynthia goes on. Oddly enough, that scene reminds me of the last scene in Gone with the Wind. After losing everything, Scarlett O'Hara is lying on the stairs in tears, wearing a long black gown. Then she suddenly looks up with a strong, determined look in her eyes and says, "After all, tomorrow is another day." Which is why Tin Men doesn't end on a sad note either. At least to me, it doesn't. I think that's fair. I mean, I think that that ending in Gone with the Wind, that is a kind of exuberant last scene. But you can also look at it another way, which is that Hollywood doesn't really like downer films. I mean, they know essentially who are the people who watch our films, mostly young people. And young people don't want to get sad. They don't want to get depressed. They don't want to feel life is lousy. So they have put in an upbeat ending. I thought that the upbeat ending in Gone with the Wind was fake. I just didn't think it was in any way credible. It was nice. It's nice to have an upbeat ending, but I didn't think it was in any way consistent with everything that had taken place before. Tin Men, I think, is different because I think that upbeat ending was consistent. I mean, it is a comedy, and it's fair enough, that they, eventually these two guys who had hated each other would realize that they have more in common than anything else, and that they would eventually make up and go into business together. I think that's entirely credible. Now, what isn't credible, and I think we've talked about this before, is the ending of The Magnificent Ambersons, which was really dark. It was a very bleak ending. And then they had screenings of The Magnificent Amazons, Orson Welles' second movie, and everybody hated it because it was so depressing. But the ending, of course, is consistent with the film. So after doing that, they decided, hey, we can't release a film that is so depressing. The audiences are going to hate this depressing ending. And then they filmed a happy ending to The Magnificent Amazons. That had nothing to do with Orson Welles. Welles had nothing to do with that. That was, I think, David Weiss, who filmed that last scene, which was somehow brought them all together. And then, oh well, that's it. That's a happy ending, and so it doesn't, and so on. But there's a real problem. I mean, American audiences do not accept bleak, depressing endings. It's just. I mean, when we're looking at Glengarry Glen Ross, which was also kind of a grim ending, but there's also a sense that, hey, life is moving on. When the Al Pacino character, says, okay, well, he's going back to his sales, he's going to the Chinese restaurant, and everything is going to continue, and we shouldn't get too down about what's just happened to the Jack Lemmon character, which was certainly very sad. Anyway, thank you very much, Cynthia. Anne Marie, always good to hear from you. And then good evening, George. Good evening, George and Gagglers. I don't want to sound ingratiating, but you've got a nice haircut, but the light was nicer and warmer the last time. Okay, well, I mean, thank you. I really appreciate you. You definitely do not sound ingratiating. I really appreciate that. Nice about the haircut. I don't know what can we do about this lighting. Let's see if I can do something about the lighting. It was warmer last time. I don't know what would be better. Is that better? Actually, that does look better. No, to me, it looks better. Anyway, anyway, let's go. Yeah, but thank you, and Marie. Maybe that's better. And then R. Brown says, You're absolutely spot on regarding taking out Trump before the convention to also get Vance out of the mix. Vance is Trump's insurance policy. Yeah, no, I think so, and I think that's if that was the case, if that is that, which I think hasn't been confirmed, but that Trump was planning to introduce Vance in Butler, Pennsylvania, at that rally, then boom, yeah, you take, that's a twofer. You take both out, and then you really have a question: what's going to happen at the convention? Then you really would have an issue. We got Haley and Rubio. Right? So, 60 cents. Having observed awful videos of Kamala Harris's failed public speaking attempts, and having learned that she does not review the briefing documents provided to her, and she subsequently blames staff despite her not doing her homework, I hereby believe the rumors that she became San Francisco DA by sleeping with the former mayor, Willie Brown. Well, I think that's how she launched her political career. Willie Brown was a very powerful figure within the California Democratic Party. She won the election. There was an election to be San Francisco DA, but she won that very narrowly. Again, so it was a close run thing for her to get that. But what's I think is interesting is we haven't really had a chance to see whether she has improved in any way. Because basically, they after her disastrous public forays, they've put her on the back burner. She's basically disappeared. She doesn't do too many public appearances, doesn't do too many interviews. So all the talk about how good she is and how much she's improved, well, we'll have to see. or whether she's going to come back with her meandering, pointless musings, or her snappy comebacks like, "Well, I haven't been to Paris either." That isn't going to work. So we'll see whether she's improved. I mean, the media now is celebrating her. Oh, she's great, fantastic. She's in the new Kamala Harris. So we'll see whether there's been any improvement. But either way, to go back to what we were talking about earlier, either way, it's not a shoe-in for Trump. Absolutely not a shoe-in. So where are we? So Robert says George should consult with the hounds. This is replying to Cynthia's comments about the coloring and the lights and everything else. George should consult with the hounds to see if the budget permits hiring a wardrobe staff. No, the budget does not permit that, because the hounds take such a slice. They take the big slice, and then there's a couple of pennies left over for me. Hiring a wardrobe staff, a gaffer, art director, and so on. Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I mean, even to put that forward before those dogs, I mean, they're just going to burst out laughing. I mean, the idea that putting that forward as a business plan. No, the business plan, they take 90% of everything, and I get the 10% and tell you, make do with that, whatever you want. So you're pretty useless either way, but the way it works, they take the 90%. And then Psinook, nice to see you. No American politician will stand up to Israel, spineless and pathetic. Well, we're going to have a lot of fun tomorrow when Netanyahu addresses the joint houses of Congress, and we'll see how much protest there will be. My feeling is that there's not going to be any protest. I just suspect that if Bernie Sanders shows up, I don't know if he will show up, but if he shows up, he'll just probably sit and not clap. I think AOC will probably just sit and not clap. But I don't think it's going to be any real heckling or harsh words. I remember, I mean, the invitation to Bibi was extended by Chuck Schumer. Schumer was, after all, just a few months ago saying Bibi must go. So from Bibi must go to, hey, welcome to Congress, Mr. Prime Minister. Anyway. And Art Brown says, my name is Frankenstein. Yeah, Frankenstein. And then I think somebody says, but I thought you were Frankenstein. And then he responds, well, you thought wrong. But the way, I mean, I can't replicate it, but it's just so funny. Well, you thought wrong. So anyway, Cynthia says, the hounds will just seize the money for themselves. You're absolutely right. Cynthia got it exactly. They take everything. The idea of putting forward a plan. Well, I think we need an art director. I mean, they would just burst out laughing at such a ridiculous idea. And then Marty says, well, I'd like to see a Gaggle discussion with Whitney Webb. And then now let's take a look at see if there's any comments on the YouTube that we need to address. Good. It's very nice that we haven't been kicked off YouTube, but that's only because we don't get any money through YouTube. So I think YouTube keeps us on as long as we're not monetized. If we were monetized, I think that would be a different. But since we're not monetized, they just keep us on and don't even bother to kick us off. Let's see. Donk. So we have to go back to the beginning, which is it's a slow process. Oh, okay. Well, now we're back. Okay. So Casey says, "Is it really pitch black already in Budapest? Though I'm in Prague, and the sun's having its last stand before setting." Yeah, but I mean, you got to think about where Prague is relative to Budapest. You know, the further north you are, the more daylight you get on the summer evenings. So you get longer summer evenings than here. So yeah, you're in great shape if you're in Prague. Here, you know, you can forget about the summer evenings. They're gone. No more summer evenings for you. So yeah, so you know that's unfortunate. Yeah, and again, if you're in London, oh, this is a great, you know, London. Oh, nice. You know, I've still got a nice long summer evening. You know, I can go out for a drink and a nice little walk. No, you can't do it here. So. V. Olaf Sodotir, 39. Wow, he does not look that young. I think he looks young. I don't know. He looks young. I think he probably look younger without the beard. Maybe I think that's why he has the beard, just to maybe look a little older. And so Don 57, Don 570 says, Andrei Yermak held a telephone conversation with National Security Advisor to U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris. His name is Phil Gordon. Blinken isn't liked by Harris. He will be forced out. Well, I mean, I think that Harris, well, it depends when Harris takes over, or if Harris takes over. I mean, because, as I said, it's quite possible that Harris will be eased into the presidency before Joe's time is up, because, you know, if they think Joe is a real nuisance and an annoyance and is not helping the Democratic Party with his antics, I think he's going to be out. I think they're not going to allow him to serve out his term. I think that was the deal that was offered to him. So if Joe is forced out, Harris it takes the throne. Yeah, probably Blinken will be out, or she'll have her own national security team that she'll listen to and will marginalize Blinken. I mean, you know, that's par for the course. She's going to have her own people. She doesn't have any ideas, but I'm sure she has her own team of loyalists. And Blinken, who is just a long-standing acolyte of Biden's, yeah, he'll be gone. So Challenger 6 says, the last 4 years have been a clown show for me. I retired in 2020 under Trump. I sit back and watch the clown show in DC. Just leave my Social Security check alone. Biden and Trump can murder each other. Okay, that's absolutely right. Absolutely right. Anyway. And then Neil Curry says, what a cruel society that his family allowed him to continue the global humiliation. Yeah, that's what happens when you get ambitious people and money. People, you know, ambitious and money grubbing people, because the longer Biden's there, the more money comes into the family's pockets. So they're going to keep him there. They don't care how humiliating it is. You know, and I think whatever the deal was struck on Sunday, I'm assuming they told Jill that she's going to be well looked after. And I think, which is why we haven't heard anything from Jill. So that basically they said, yeah, we're going to look after you. Don't think that you're going to end your days in penury. You'll get a compensation. Richard Phillips says the haircut is a big improvement. Thank you very much. But somebody else just got Bustelo Maserati says, no, I like his hair long. All right, thank you. And then Rail Fanning says the regime administrative state runs the US. It shows how performative and fake US elections and voting are. The regime was okay with Potato Joe over the last 3 years. I agree. I mean, they went through that whole process of the primaries and voting and everything else. And then when they suddenly realized that they were facing defeat, they said, okay, fine, boom, let's just ignore what happened in the primaries. Let's just ignore all the votes that Joe won. These were real votes. These are voters who went out and voted. They went out in the cold. They risked the cold weather. They went out to vote for Joe. We don't care about any of that. The hell with you. What we care about is winning. And if we don't think we're going to win with Joe, we're going to dump him. So much for that. So much for all the primaries. So much for all that whole democratic process. The party leader said, no, we're not going to win. Goodbye. You're absolutely right. I mean, it shows that the democracy is a sham. What kind of a process is this when you can just ignore millions of voters and just install the person you want and just say, well, no, this is whom we're going to go for. And let's imagine if there was somebody else around who the party would think would do better than Kamala, they would dump Kamala in a heartbeat. If they believe that there's somebody like somebody they could just parachute in, whether it's Newsom, but Newsom doesn't have success. But let's say, George Clooney. If they thought for one moment George Clooney or The Rock, some celebrity could come in and win the election for them, they would not hesitate to dump Harris as well. All right. Yeah, so Rail Fanning says Kamala is merely another regime apparatchik who does exactly what the regime tells her to do. Yeah, no, that's exactly who she is. That's exactly it. And the media will now, do its thing of elevating her and tell us that and then Mr. Boston quotes Biden. I was the lifeguard at the swimming pool. I had hairy legs. Black kids love to touch them. Yeah, and that was from that's the 2020 election. So that's not something he said yesterday. I mean, that's from 4 years ago, and that was fine. Nobody said anything about it at the time. And then leave the record player on so black kids can hear words. Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah. And then Rail fans said Trump is an existential crisis for the regime. The pro-regime forces are all backing Kamala. Yeah, no, I think that. I mean, then the question is, will that succeed? Will they be able to pull off what they pulled off in 2020? I wouldn't put it past them. As I said, the notion that somehow, she's so ridiculous and she's so pathetic and that she'll lose. I do not think that that's at don't think that's at all going to be a done deal. I think it's going to be a tough election, and could go either way. Mr. Boss said Larry Fink is a friend of mine, and he pulled the negative ads involving the shooter. Yeah, that's right. But I think Josh Hawley has given a warning that you better preserve all the records involved in that in the creation of that ad, how that came about. So I'm just going through some of the points. Yeah, the Jim pass about George. Try backing away a few feet. Very hard, very hard to read. When you're on the Rumble Studio, the lettering is absolutely tiny, and it's white against black, and I have real difficulties reading white against black. So yeah, I'm sorry, but I know it looks terrible when I'm sort of poking my face into the screen and so on. Neil Curry says, do a cookery half hour with Chris Eubanks. Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking about it, like a cookery half hour. I was thinking of, maybe doing a kind of a music thing, having a, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, having some music experts come on and, trying to find the right music for the gaggle. I haven't really thought this through, but, if we could have somebody come on and suggest, kinds of musics that could be posted onto the Gaggle locals board. Anyway, Sinok says, how do you see this playing out? Harris is already calling Trump a rapist and has the support of the mainstream media. No one ever mentions the fact that she's an idiot and screwed, married Willie Brown to get her start. Well, I think that's it. I mean, I think that she will run on that platform that she's a person of integrity. She's a former prosecutor, a tough as nails prosecutor, sending people behind bars. And while Trump is a rapist and a crook and a cheat and all the rest of it. I don't think that's going to work as an election issue. Again, that's not the question whether she wins or not doesn't depend on that. But I don't think that's going to work as an election issue, simply because it's already, it's baked in. We've already had all the talk about Trump the rapist, Trump the sexual assaulter. We had this back in 2016 with the Billy Bush tape and the grab him by the crotch and all that. It's baked in. There's nothing new that you can add on that. And then she can talk about that ridiculous case in New York about he committed fraud without having defrauded anybody. It's not going to fly. No one's going to buy that. So I don't think those are issues that are going to work in the election. Just like I think she's going to try running on the issue of abortion and reproductive choice and blah blah blah. I don't think that's going to work either. Trump isn't going to talk about abortion. He's made it clear abortion is a local issue. It's not a national issue. So I'm not going to be drawn into a discussion about abortion. So I think that's just a non-starter. I know the media were running with this. Oh, abortion is going to be a huge issue. No, it's not. I mean, abortion was a big issue when the candidates would debate getting people onto the Supreme Court. Oh, well, if we get a liberal onto the Supreme Court, then we're going to keep Roe v. Wade in place, and then if we get a conservative, we're going to get rid of Roe v. Wade. Well, that's gone. Roe v. Wade's gone, so that issue is gone. The Supreme Court isn't going to address abortion for a generation, so there's no point in bringing that up. So what can you do with abortion? Well, you can do it on a local level. And on a local level, maybe it works for the Democrats. So far, it's worked for the Democrats. But on a national level, I don't see what you can do with it. Trump isn't going to touch it. Now, Harris can say, well, yeah, if I'm president, I'm going to pass a federal law legalizing abortion. Okay. Maybe, but you would need to have vast, huge majorities in both houses of Congress to pass federal abortion legislation. You're going to need an enormous filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. Otherwise, it's not going to pass. It's just a non-starter that you're going to pass a federal abortion legislation. So, if you go down that path of making this election about abortion and gun rights, you're going to fail. I mean, that's just not. Those are not national election issues, and election issue will be the economy, inflation, immigration, maybe the two disastrous wars. But abortion is just not going to be a big issue. Again, it's a fantasy. Politico and all these rubbishy political magazines. They oh yeah, abortion. Oh, it's going to really be great for the Democrats. No, it's not. And the same with this thing of trying to make it about Trump's legal problems. It didn't work for Biden. Not going to work for her. I mean, Biden and the Democrats thought, oh yeah, we'll do this lawfare and it's going to work for us. It hasn't. So then Robert says, thank you very much, Robert. Thank you for your generosity. Says, Tulsi Gabbard eliminated Harris from the 2020 primaries by drawing attention to her awful record, as California Attorney General. Yes, she did. As Attorney General, she had incarcerated 1,500 blacks and Hispanics to marijuana possession, as well as acting to prevent the parole of prisoners to keep them on as cheap labor. I don't see how Harris can recover from this if Trump brings it up in the debates. Yeah, I think so. The problem, and there's a slight difference here, Tulsi did this within the Democratic primaries. So she was attacking Harris, so to speak, from the left. She was saying, well, Harry, you did this. Look, you were really terrible for the minorities. Look at all the people, minorities that you incarcerated. And then the whole thing about the prisoners and cheap labor. And that was effective because it's a Democratic Party debate. And you had Democratic Party voters listening to that debate, and I think that was a devastating blow against Harris. The problem is that this will be a national election, and she'll be up against Trump. Trump can't really. I mean, he may try. and I wouldn't put it past him that he would try bringing that up against her. But that kind of undercuts him, because he has to be he's the law and order person. So, how many speeches has he delivered saying that he's going to be really tough on drugs? He's not been a kind of a libertarian when it comes to drugs. I mean, how many times has he told that story about talking to Xi Jinping about what do you do with your with your drug problems? And then he said, well, we don't have a drug problem. And then I asked Xi Jinping, well, how come you don't have a drug problem? He says, quick trials. And Trump said, quick trials. And then, what he meant by that is that Xi Jinping, you got drugs, you're caught with drugs, or, you're selling drugs or whatever. You have a quick trial and they dump you in prison for, I don't know how many decades. Now, when Trump did that, Trump did it with approval. He said, yeah, it was Xi Jinping. He had the right idea to deal with on the issue of drugs. So it's going to be hard for Trump suddenly to pose as a kind of a libertarian and a penal reformer, someone who doesn't believe in imprisoning people for possession or selling drugs. Now, I think he'll try to do it, because I think he did try to do that in 2020 when he started attacking Biden for sponsoring the 1994 crime bill. And so he tried to run to the left of Biden on crime, but it blew up in Trump's face, because you can't be the law and order president and be in favor of releasing people from prison, and believing that, oh, there are too many people in prison, blah, 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 so on. So I don't know. I say I think Trump will try it, but if he does try it, I think he'll fall flat on his face, just as he did in 2020. You gotta be either one or the other. Either you're going to be the law and order person, or you're going to be the penal reformer who thinks that too many people are unjustly behind bars. Can't really do both. Tulsi could do that, because it was in the before Democratic Party voters, and they were obviously sympathetic to her message. Trump is going to have a harder time of it. Anyway, Anne-Marie says, I'm so glad that you also doubt the official version of the Trump assassination story. Although theoretically possible, I don't believe it for 1 second, though. Beside the many things which seem very implausible and even ridiculous, it just seems to me too unbelievable that by turning his head in just that moment and getting away with a mere scratch on his ear, he escaped death. Well, that part I think I do believe, because he was clearly, the bullet hit his ear. There was blood. You could see the blood. Somebody got killed. Somebody's dead. And then two other people were seriously wounded. So some shots took place. And I don't think, Trump would have taken part in staging an assassination that involved his taking a shot in his ear. That's, I don't think anybody would do that. But I don't believe the official story, in the sense that I don't believe that this 20-year-old, without any kind of real serious background of sharp shooting, was able to accomplish so much, and how he was this building. He was gone onto the building. It was outside the security perimeter. Nobody checked the roof of the building. He had been identified earlier in the day as being a very suspicious-looking character. They did nothing, and nothing was done about that. And then miraculously, after he had shot at Trump, got a lot of shots in, he was immediately taken out by a counter sniper. Well, how did the counter sniper? That's awfully good targeting on the part of the counter sniper. Well, he had to wait before he took the shots, Trump before he took him out. So there's an awful lot of questions, and it was amazing that that woman from the Secret Service didn't seem to have any answers. I mean, 10 days had elapsed, and you didn't have any answers at all to these questions. I mean, well, I don't know, it's under investigation. Well, okay, maybe under investigation, but you should be able to, in 10 days, there's plenty of time to come up with some kind of a timeline of what happened on Saturday. She didn't have anything. She arrived with nothing. That makes it very suspicious. It means that they still haven't cobbled together some kind of a plausible story, and they're sort of wandering around, hoping that at some point there'll be a credible story, and then they can blame everything on some junior level Secret Service official. This incompetence, terrible incompetence on the part of some junior or mid-level people. Blame everything on them. But that's the next step, but it's taking time for them to cobble together a plausible story. Sinook, thank you very much for your generosity. Really appreciate it. Summer Petra says, how serious is Ukraine's cutting off of Hungary's and Slovakia's pipeline oil supplies? Yeah, so this has been going on now for the past week or so. Ukraine has sanctioned Lukoil, big oil producer in Russia, so that Lukoil cannot transport its oil to Hungary's refineries across Ukraine. And now Hungary is saying, well, we're not getting any oil into our refineries, and that's a real problem because we don't really have any alternative means of getting oil. I mean, we could try to divert it, via tankers, but that's a whole hassle because then you have to set up a way of getting the tankers to ports in Croatia and then transport it from the ports of Croatia into Hungary. And so we get the Hungarian refineries in Hungary and the Hungarian refineries in Slovakia, and they say, well, we just don't have the oil. Now, your question is, how serious is it? Well, we don't know. At this stage, the Hungarians are very upset, but whether this will have the dire consequences that the Hungarians will have, we don't yet know. I mean, Hungary is very vulnerable, obviously, because it's getting its oil via the pipelines. Now, everybody else has, the EU imposed sanctions against Russian oil. So everybody who got his oil from Russia by sea, they said, that's it, no more oil from Russia, but then they can find oil elsewhere. I mean, if you're getting it by tankers, it really isn't a problem, finding another source of oil and get the tankers there. But there was a cutout for Hungary and Slovakia because they're getting their oil through pipelines. So now they clearly they're applying the pressure against Hungary because both Hungary and Slovakia rely on this oil via pipelines, and it's very difficult. I mean, if this is how you're getting your oil, your refineries are geared towards this particular kind of oil, the oil from the Urals, and you can't just simply substitute some other oil because that's not how the refineries work. So, if things go on like this, it's going to be a big problem, and therefore it could be a very pricey winter here in Hungary. So it's going to be really bad. I mean, winters are grim enough here at best of times, but when you're paying twice or three times as much for your gas bills, then winters are even more depressing. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see whether then this is going to be resolved, or whether Ukraine is just applying pressure using this attack on Lukoil to apply pressure against Hungary. I mean, that I assume that's what Ukraine is doing because, I mean, Lukoil, you're not going to do anything against Lukoil. I mean, they make a lot of money. They can sell oil wherever they like. So the sanctioning Lukoil is meaningless. It's not going to punish them. Sanctioning Lukoil, however, is a big deal for Hungary because then they don't get any oil. It's a big deal for Slovakia because Slovakia depends on Hungarian refineries. So to answer your question, sounds like it's a problem. The Hungarian government seems pissed off about it, but whether it's going to be resolved. I mean, the Hungarians want the EU to do something to help them. I'm not sure the EU is much in the mood to help Hungary one way or another. So yeah, I mean, they say, hey, you gotta apply pressure on Ukraine. Ukraine wants to join the EU, but look what he's doing to us. I don't think anyone in the EU is listening. Anyway, so let's. I mean, yeah. Hugh Keenan says the new George, smooth, crisp, clean, clipped, and ripped. Nice. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Sinok, no American politician will stand. Oh, yeah, we had this one before. So. Rail Fanning says, honestly, at this point, the only reason I would vote for Republicans is to keep the left-wing lunatics of the Supreme Court. No, I mean, I think that's a very fair point. I mean, the Supreme Court, I mean, this latest term was actually very good. They came up with some very good rulings. I think the the immunity ruling was, I think, a very good one. I think the overturning of the Chrysler exemption, that was a good ruling. The Fisher ruling was pretty good. Some duds. The free speech ruling was a crappy ruling written by Amy Coney Barrett. That was a terrible ruling. Absolutely. Just totally went against free speech. So you're right. You get some of these awful people onto the Supreme Court, and suddenly you're going to have a very different. You're going to get very different rulings on all sorts of things. The immunity ruling could easily have gone the other way, and that would have been very, very, very problematic. Neil Curry says Trump has most likely has Godfather lines going through his mind as he keeps these people close, meaning that keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. Somebody should explain to me. I've never understood Godfather 2. Why exactly Hyman Roth is so desperate to kill Michael Corleone. It didn't make any sense to me because, I mean, again, somebody can explain this way, simply because when he explains what the issue was, he talks about, when you killed Mo Green. But at the same time, Hyman Roth's theory of the case is that this is all about business. We should never let, personal feelings get in the way. And so it doesn't matter. Okay, they killed Mo Green. He loved Mo Green, but that's personal feelings. He says it's all about business. So I don't get. I mean, he's he's trying to secure this big business deal between this is Hyman Roth with the Corleone family. Why would you want to kill Michael Corleone? I didn't get that. I mean, in the first with Godfather 1, it made sense why they wanted to kill Vito, because Vito didn't want to get into the drug business. And they thought once they get rid of Vito, then Santino takes over. And Santino clearly showed himself as willing to get into drugs. But Godfather 2 never made sense to me. Anyway. So, boy, there's a lot of comments. All right. I think I've been on now for a while, and you know, I think probably people are kind of. Neil Curry says, "You make bundles of sense, Mr. S. Don't really give a monkeys about your appearance." Oh, thank you so much. That's very nice of you. Thank you. So anyway, thank you everybody who have joined me. Thank you for all of your comments, all of your ideas, criticisms, opinions. It's all very, very interesting for me. I'm always learning from everything you say. We're going to be back Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, same thing. And as you know, what happens on the day after the live stream, I have to face these awful hounds who don't like me, have no sympathy for me. They think I'm doing a terrible job, and so I have to, go hat in hand to them, special pleading. But anyway, that's my headache. Thank you above all to everybody who has contributed very generously. Really appreciate your contributions. That's what keeps us going, and without that, we'd be in some trouble. So thank you so much. We'll be back Thursday, same time. Look forward to seeing you all. All the best. Good night. See you then.